All right. Hopefully I got the technical issue worked out. Just waiting for Paul to rejoin me. I had to do an update of Windows 10, and the darn thing changed my default browser over to Edge. And you can just imagine what kind of chaos that's causing over here. Um, I'm I'm here. Just let me go into Chrome here and find the page that I'm supposed to see. And things are slowed right down. All right. I don't know if this is working or not. Here we go. We're getting into the page that I need here. All right. All right, Greg, I see you. I see you in the chat room. So I am actually live. Great. All right. I'm going to go share this with the email list and get everybody else in here. And Paul was on with me and he's disappeared. So hopefully he comes back here in a second. There he is. Hey, Paul, how are you? So we are live.
Okay.
Awesome.
Good. So
and people are starting to join in here, and I just sent it out, and it went out on Twitter and Facebook and everything, and so people are starting to leave comments and everything, so that's perfect. All right, and let me share this screen because I put it together, so we might as well share it, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So this live session between me and Paul is going to be basically for people who are in business today and they're under a lot of stress because of what's happening here with this virus, this coronavirus. And hey, Jay York. And we're going to be talking about a way to pause, breathe, and think about what's going on in a business so that you can give yourself an opportunity to try and make some changes that hopefully will lead to the survival of the business. And so while you guys are on my channel and you guys know me quite well, Paul has been a guest on here a few times. And Paul, why don't we just take a second and talk a little bit about your background? You've been a guest on a couple of the holiday chat calls over the years. You're a business broker. Why don't you take us down the list and give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. The business broker is my most recent endeavors, but I am a graduate engineer. Went to Michigan Tech, electrical engineering, graduated over 50 years ago, and came out into the marketplace and was a sales engineer in the day of the IBM sales engineer. And after doing that for nearly 10 years with some other fellow engineers, we went to Montana and bought an awards manufacturing company and distributed trophies and awards all over the Northwest United States and built up different retail stores. And then years later sold that, and I came back into the Michigan area where I did business consulting, started out with productivity, leadership training, and worked at every level in the automotive supply chain. So worked with all the big companies all the way down to the car dealerships, suppliers, collision repair. And from all of those vast experiences, I owned a number of businesses along the way, and seen both the big guys and how they act, and the little guys and how they act when times of trouble hit. And you all recall the car industry had their problems. I was around at the Y2K era, and lots of fun things.
Awesome. And a big reason why I wanted you to come on, Paul, was because you do have this wide range of experience, and you have a few years on me. So you've been through a couple more recessions than I have. And what we've had happen in a lot of states and provinces across North America, and certainly in Western Europe, is we've actually had governments turn off up to a fifth of the economy, just through the different controls and everything to stop the spread of this virus. And so while we don't have the numbers yet of economic activity, I can almost certainly say that when we have the reporting of what the economy is doing in this period of time, it will almost certainly be in recession.
Well, I would agree with that. And every day you hear a little more, and you hear the wizards, if you may, on Wall Street, and the experts in government, and they are trying to keep a positive momentum. But the reality is, when everybody stays home in the streets of, I'm in the Detroit metropolitan area, our streets are pretty well empty, and businesses have shut down. And the cumulative effect of that is stifling.
Well, there are some businesses that are still operating today. You know, I drove past a construction site the other day. Those guys are still working. And so parts of the economy are still functioning, although when the ripple from the retail trade and all the people who've been laid off reaches into other areas of the economy, it's not going to be pretty. And the problem is, though, and here, let me change the slide, is that the danger in all of this for business owners is panic, fear, inaction, and sort of a disbelief of what's happening. I've already talked to some business owners who simply can't believe that they've been put out of business, basically, by government rules, and they're worried and hoping that things will just get better and fix themselves. I don't think necessarily is a wise mindset to have. Hoping that the government is going to loan you money or give you some money or fix something, I think too is a trap that some people might fall into. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to provide a little bit of leadership and guidance for people who may find themselves with a business who are afraid, and they know that they probably need to do something, but they may not know what to do. And what you and I have discussed a little bit is a formula for how you can sit down, go through a framework for taking a look piece by piece at your business and giving yourself some ideas. And we're going to share some ideas, but more importantly, I want to teach people this methodology of how they can systematically look at their business and question a lot of things that they may take for granted every day.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important. You had sent out a correspondence, I think a little over a week and a half ago, and it was about the same time I noted that things were getting pretty serious with the entire coronavirus situation. And in that email, you said things can change fast. And I chuckled to myself. I said, boy, he's right on in that. And the word fast was something that I was preparing, actually, a presentation that I was supposed to deliver today at a conference of business owners. And the conversation that we had had prior to that in selling the business that I was involved in, I mentioned to you, boy, I did that just in time. I got that business closed and sold and launched, because had we not done that, today, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, things have changed fast, and that transaction may not have happened. Well, every business that's out there is faced with the same thing. And in a fast-moving society, this one has been brought on by forces not in our control, but you've got to be able to move fast. And the words that I associate with that acronym are focus, assess, systematize, and train. And these are things that I'm telling people, my clients I'm in conversation with. Well, what'll I do now? First of all, you have to talk them off the ledge.
Hmm.
Everybody is calling each other. In the first day or so, when this started getting really serious, I must have had 100 emails, some from people that I'm in conversation with routinely, and some I haven't talked to in a year or 10 years. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why are they all of a sudden interested in me? I haven't heard from them in years. And the answer is fear. They're grabbing out for whatever connections they have, and whether they want to sell their wares or get some emotional support. And that causes noise. That causes a lot of chaotic activity. And I found myself not wanting to be upset, but to say, Paul, you've got to focus on your most critical resources. And then you have to assess what are your priorities. I've talked with people all the time. All their children are home now, and their children are home needing to be schooled, and they're needing to be orderly. But what is your own personal assessment? Everybody is different. I was talking to a guy who happened to be in the UK this morning, and he had to leave the phone early because one of his small children, they were trying to get a doctor. He was spending the last 2 hours trying to get a hold of a doctor. So we have to be sensitive to everybody's situation, but the first person to make healthy is yourself. Assess your own situation and make sure you're in control and calm.
Well, and when we think about ourselves and our family, we it's just like that little safety card in the airplane. You put your own oxygen mask on before you can put on someone else's. You can help someone with another one. You have to make sure that you can function. And so it is with our businesses, because for most people, the business that the family owns is the number one source of income that supports the whole family. And the other people who work in the business, it's their family's lifeline too. And so this is the danger of inaction. If you don't do something and the business ends up ending in some way, failing, then everybody loses out. And so action has to be taken in order to make sure that you preserve some level of economic activity in that business so that you have something that can recover. And when we talk to business owners and we say something has to be done, you have to react in some way, it's easy to panic because we don't know what to think about first. But as I like to say, accountants have spent 300 years trying to replicate or summarize the activity of a business using just a few pieces of paper. And Paul, when you and I were talking earlier this week, we said, you know what? That's the tool to go and take a systematic look at a business and kind of step through it one piece at a time and look at what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a business by using the financial statements as a guide. And it's going to lead us through that flow from the way we serve customers to how we deliver the service to the way we manage all of the things, the apparatus we need in place to have the business function, and look at ways that we can address things to try to survive this crisis.
Exactly. When you look at a business as the business owner, and I know we have multiple business owners on your call here, or people looking to maybe acquire a business, either buy or sell it. And as a business owner, and I've had multiple over the years, I take that as a serious responsibility, and every business owner really does. And your point about it's not only their family and whether it's a retail store or a little manufacturing company or whatever, that business owner and management team is emotionally affected, not only by their own dynamic and situation to keep stability in their home, but they are being faced now with being the leader and the beacon for all of these other people of how they're going to survive. And one of the business owners I was talking to here this week, we concluded and recognized that very few of his people had sustenance to go a week or two. They were all living on a string. And when you think of the people that live in the tip economy, or they have no reserves to speak of. And so people are going to be called upon to address a lot of things. And if you're the owner, as you point out in this list, the first thing you have to look at is, what are your revenues? What resources do you have coming in? Or what accounts receivable haven't you collected? I was quick in the last week or two to look at every opportunity I had to do invoicing, do billings, do collections, do partial payments, so that I could get those invoices in place to my customers so they had the opportunity to pay me. And I work that was half done or completed or whatever, I would attempt to invoice for at least partial work, because I figured if it normally takes them a week to pay me, it's going to probably take them a month to pay me now.
Yeah.
So I've advised all my clients to make certain that whatever work you have that is due you, in a very kind way, invoice it and expect to collect it.
Well, and I think at this point, what I'd like to mention to people who are watching is that there's a difference between having a profit in a business, operating a business profitably, and the cash flow of a business. And anyone who sells services and then bills people later, they realize this. You can make a sale today and not get the cash for a while in the future. And so there are different things that can happen, events that can happen that can bring money through the door, and things that can happen to make money leave. And they're not necessarily strictly tied to the profitability of the business. So I'll give you an example. Paul, you were talking about how you could have recorded a sale last month, and if you collect it today, money will come in the door today, but that's not going to affect this month's revenue because we recorded that sale last month. And so one of the dangers that people get into, and I think this is on one of the slides coming up, is that in a panic, they will start to do things to get cash, which, while it may save your skin today, can start to undermine the future of the business that you've built. And so on the slide right now, we have an income statement. We've got the revenue, then the direct costs, labor, materials, inputs, which gives you your gross profit. And then out of the gross profit, we have our various expenses, which lead to our net profit. And so if you haven't before, now is the time to look at your numbers. Look at how your business has been performing, because when you look at that revenue number, the first question in my mind is, what can we do to bring in some money? And if you're in a business that has been shut down by government rules, if you're a barbershop and they've simply told you have to close, then maybe there isn't any opportunity to bring in some money. But I'm starting to see some increasingly creative things being done by people. In just this morning's newspaper, there's a wholesale food distributor here where I live locally, and their orders to restaurants obviously have gone down because a lot of restaurants have been forced to close. And so what they're now setting up is a drive-through where people can pull up to their warehouse and have a box of food delivered to their trunk, for addressing the fact that some people don't want to go to the grocery store even though they're still open. And when I read that, I was like, wow, that is an incredibly creative way for them to take inventory that would normally be going to restaurants and finding a new way to sell it by finding a new customer. They have to figure out how to communicate to those customers. Obviously, getting into the newspaper was a big part of that. But they're trying to turn their inventory into cash. They're trying to generate revenue in a completely different way. And that, I think, is one of the essences of challenging fundamental assumptions, because the people that work in that business every day have always gone out to serve restaurateurs. And they were challenged to figure out, what on earth are we going to do now that our regular customers aren't buying from us?
That's correct. The formula of business acceleration, if you may, is I like to use the term cash to cash conversion. You take your money and you open a restaurant. So you've got to pay for your rent and your facilities. You then have to buy the food that you're going to prepare. And then hopefully a customer will come in, purchase, consume the food, and then pay at the exit. So your cash that you put into both fixed costs and then your cash you put into your inventory, the butter and eggs and toast that you prepared, is an investment that you've made in your business. Some is quickly liquidatable, some of which is not liquidatable at all. And at this time, without putting yourselves in jeopardy, it's really important to take whatever investments that are deeply made in your business that you can turn into cash to give you the reserve to reinvest. Let's say, for example, people aren't going to be, you've got an inventory of steak and people aren't real inclined to sit around your restaurant and enjoy a bottle of wine and steak dinner. It would be a good time to liquidate those and maybe have some cash so you can have bacon and eggs and make scrambled eggs for folks if you're in that restaurant. Or as you pointed out, if you happen to be in the wholesale distribution business, food is an extraordinarily critical resource. So look in your business at your critical resources that add value to the society and respect them for that. See how you can convert them and bring them out to the community at a liquidated or at a fair market price.
You know, the second item there on the screen is direct costs. So when we think about, and using the restaurant example again, we think about a restaurant, we think about the servers and the bartenders and the people working in the kitchen. And where I live here, a lot of these restaurants that have been forced to close have let their staff go. Again, they're choosing to react by going to zero cost, or as close as they can come to zero cost. So they're trying to eliminate everything and wait until, things open up. But if that restaurant we're sitting on, like in your example, a whole bunch of steak, well, one of the things that comes to my mind is the fact that these grocery delivery services where you get the fresh food and the recipe delivered to you and with instructions on how to cook it yourself. If I was a steakhouse owner and I had a whole, cooler full of steak, I could easily put together do-it-yourself at-home grill kits where I deliver the steaks, the veggies, etc., for people to grill in their own backyards. I mean, there's different ways that you can brainstorm about how you can have this happen and really do it with minimal labor. It's just a matter of getting the message out to your clientele, which drives home the point that when you own a business, you have to have a relationship with your customers. You have to have a way to communicate with them and let them know what you're doing.
That's a very critical point, David, and it's maybe a little bit too late for some business owners right now, but certainly with the internet over the last 5 years, and I've been doing some work in Wi-Fi in one of my other business units, and have told people, start building a library of email addresses and phone numbers of all of your customers. Particularly the higher end restaurants or properties should almost have a book of clientele that they could now, by email or by telephone call them and say, what can we do to help? They're announcing on a number of the main restaurants down here in this area, the Burger Kings, et cetera, are saying, you buy a one adult meal and we'll give you 2 children's meals. Because the children need to eat. They're not home from school. And in the Detroit metropolitan and most city areas, big city areas, you have children that get 2 of their meals out of 3 probably at the school system. So this is an opportunity not only for the big guys, it's easy for them to set up because you can get hundreds of locations, but every little restaurant or other services, not only food, but other services that can be brought into the community, to the churches, the synagogues, the other community centers. Those are innovations that I think are going to come to pass here in the next 6 weeks.
Well, and you mentioned something really important about that Burger King offer that you use as an example, um, is that in a time of crisis, what really hits home for customers is the notion of gratitude and generosity. If you are behaving in a way where you are helping to solve the problem, if you are contributing to a solution, if it's seen that your offer is one that is taking people's fears into account, then it's not a problem to keep selling, because in providing some kind of good or service in exchange for money, you're doing a lot of good in your community, you're keeping your business open, your employees busy, etc. But in messaging, if you can come across as being concerned and giving, it goes a long way. Now, I got an email from my local Sherwin-Williams paint store here the other day, and they were saying that they understood people were concerned about the transmission of this virus. And they were saying that people could now call ahead and order their paint and have it mixed and pay over the phone. And when you drive over, you can call them from the parking lot and they would come out and put the cans of paint in your trunk. And if anyone wanted to get a project done while they were stuck at home, they included a 30% off coupon. And so when I read that message, I thought, you know what? Every 2 or 3 weeks, they send me a 30% off coupon. That's not a big deal. They're in the business of selling paint. But the fact that they're sending me this email, which addresses what they perceive to be my concern, I really thought that was a great email. And I've gotten a lot of these emails from different big companies, and they all just say that they're cleaning more, essentially, or that they've cut hours, which in my mind, I think, oh, you're cutting labor, and this is supposed to help me, you know. But that message I thought was important because it demonstrated empathy. They were trying to get themselves into the head of their customer, and somebody who might want to paint a room might think, you know what, it's really not a necessary chore. I'm supposed to avoid contact with other people as much as possible. Maybe I'll just let it pass. And they said, you know what, if someone is afraid to come and, touch a surface or touch hands or be too close to one of our employees, let's figure out a way so that people can do business with us and we'll get rid of all of those fears.
David, you point out something around this idea of focus and assessment for your business. If you are a business owner, these innovations that you hear about, many will be here to stay permanently. If in fact, for example, your Sherwin-Williams story proves out to be successful for them, the new expectation for delivering that product to customers will be the formula that they just laid out. Instead of going to the big box store, standing in line and waiting for them to mix it, the new order of the day will be, of course, I want to paint something and this is what I need. I have the code numbers. I'm just going to go on the internet, put it in, order it up. They'll paint it. They'll call me on my cell phone as I drive by and I'll pick it up. So we now have an opportunity to redesign business processes. We're going to be redesigning sales processes. I made comment to one of my clients that had a lot of staff that had to be laid off in terms of their accounting office. And I cautioned them that when we get through this, whether it's 6 weeks or 6 months, it is not likely that he will need the level of accounting staff he currently has because his business processes are poorly executed today. And when he gets through this shock, he will not be able to afford to rebuild it with the poor model he has. He's going to have to use newer, more innovative electronic means. And maybe this is the change that was forced upon him. And it will be beneficial. But the entire cost structures of the business are likely to change dramatically because of these innovations.
What we've got expenses there, rent, phone, administrative salaries. You just addressed that. Administrative salaries, that would be things like the accounting staff, internet, insurance, taxes. We're hearing from a lot of governments that they are going to be deferring the payment of taxes, which I'll remind people doesn't mean you're not paying them. It just means you're paying them later. And then there's transport, freight, utilities, et cetera. I think in our correspondence, you had a list there at one point with a bunch of ideas about sort of expenses. Were there some of those on there you wanted to touch on?
Well, I do want to touch on the one you just mentioned, and I call it beware of the gifts from government.
Yeah, I know.
Uh, so all our government is trying to help us. And I'm a very positive guy, and I look at everything everybody's trying to do as trying to be beneficial. But every negotiation I've ever been into, when you're sitting around the table with multiple parties, the truth of the matter is everybody's at the table for their own self-interest. And the government folks will try to be serving both your interest and their self-interest as a politician, and et cetera, et cetera. So when in fact they construct their offers for loans, their offers for prepayments, like you said, their offers for deferred taxes, not eliminated taxes. They're announcing here in the USA, they're going to hopefully defer all the college loans. I mean, we have $1 trillion worth of loans on the young people. And boy, that could grow from a deferral to wiping it out and making sure all the rest of us pay off their college loans. So when in fact the offers are made to your business, just beware of the fine detail. It's about as difficult, and I know you and I've talked about SBA loans and government loans. And when you really go to negotiate those and get those signed out, they take your third toe as part of the guarantee. So just be careful of government loans.
Yeah. So, and again, keep in mind when you're pushing off a payment, you may be improving your cash flow, but it's not going to improve your profitability. In order to improve profitability, especially if your revenues have gone down and you're trying to figure out how you can change things to stay afloat, you have to eliminate expenses, not defer them. So you need to figure out ways to cut things out, and you need to not be afraid to ask for help. So for example, if you lease a space for your business to be in and you've been forced by the government to close your space, one of the things that I would do is start talking to my landlord and simply ask them, do you guys want to be in a position 6 months from now where you're trying to find a new tenant here? Or are we going to work something out where I get a discount on the months when I'm forced to close? Or maybe you give me a month for free. Don't be afraid to ask people, not for deferrals, but to change the deal that you have. Because even though you have a contract, both parties can agree to change a contract. And every landlord out there who owns a shopping center or a strip mall or what have you, they are keenly aware that they can't pay their mortgage payments if you guys aren't paying your rent in your businesses. And if you're not there and you're not alive and your business isn't functioning, you're not going to be paying any rent. And in the day and age of Amazon and these other trends, which are driving more and more business online, if you have a real world business and you have a landlord, you don't just have a problem, you both have a problem. So don't be afraid to challenge every contract for every expense and input that you have and go looking for help. I got an email from the telephone company saying that they knew a lot of people were working from home with these internet rocket sticks and various devices that people use to connect to the internet over the cell phone system. And the phone company was giving every small business and personal user an extra 10 gig of data for the month and taking $10 off their bill. They're doing their part to help reduce the expenses, which is very different from saying we're going to let you pay your bill late, which is the same expense, it's just put off. Helps your cash flow, but be like Paul just said, be careful of gifts that help your cash flow but really don't help you in the long run.
Right. David, let me add on to that. Reflection back when the automotive industry went through its collapse. And I'm not going to, I was the kind of guy, business owner, took my businesses very responsibly and felt terrible about everybody that got stiffed from the government on down in the auto industries. They basically bankrupted one heck of a lot of business owners. And I paid all my bills. That doesn't make me the nicest guy in the world. I just felt this tremendous moral obligation and struggled for many, many years to pay off. And I looked at many businesses that basically stiffed each other, and I didn't think that was right. And now here is 20 years later, and I look at the last 20 years as I have tried to be honorable and watched all the other people, in many cases, were dishonorable. And so I want to go back to something that you said is not necessarily asking for forgiveness or whatever, but restructuring your deals. And I look back at some of the things that I took the hit on and I wasn't able to collect and other things. And what I should have done probably is been more aggressive at recognizing it and didn't let them do me in, because they paid somebody. They just didn't pay me. And I should have been aggressive and cut a better deal. Get them to give me what it is they got. Or in the other case, if I obligated or I owed people, I remember I paid for 5 years for a lease copy machine that most other people told the lease company, stick it, keep your copy machine. I'm not going to pay the bill. Chase me if you'd like. I paid that bill for $500 a month for 5 years. What I should have done, I should have gone to that lease company and cut a better deal. I should have traded them my services or done something different. And I want to really reinforce what you said, because I think you gave very, very good advice. Be positive, be aggressive, but go into your businesses and say, how can I be honorable in fulfilling, but how can I cut a better deal? Because that's what the contract needs change, not just deferred.
Yeah. And if you have a contract with another service provider, some other small business is doing something in your business, say it's a cleaning company or someone who comes to take care of plants in the office or one of these things, don't be afraid to call those people up and talk to them and say, look, the situation now warrants that I have to try to cut every expense I can. And we've worked well together over the years, but you know what? I would rather work something else out with you. I would rather us come to an agreement to cancel your services than to have you come here and do work and have me call you in a month or two when I can't pay your bill. And I'll tell you, if you get out in front of it and you are honest and open with people, and I mean, everybody understands everybody's problem. Every business person out there understands. Get out there and talk about it and be open and honest. Not only is it going to be a way for you to change your obligations and reduce those expenses, but you will end up building your personal business person's goodwill in your business community by treating people this way, by being open, honest, and wanting to be collaborative in helping to save your business. Because if you're still around in a year's time, you can hire them again. If you're not around, you can't hire them.
Right. I want to go back to the fast. We said focus on your business, assess your business honestly to get these details on a piece of paper so you can look at them objectively and then begin to systematize them. Look at things you're going to change in your system, whether it's the Sherwin-Williams example or accounting example. You're going to do things differently going forward in your systems. And then your training and retraining yourself, retraining your people. One of the things that can be done, I have licenses in insurance and real estate and the sorts, and my wife also has such. And I said, Rachel, let's take this time and schedule CE credits. Let's get online and get to the training forums, and we'll take care of any learning that we need. And there's also new things that I'm doing in innovations and podcasts and the sort. And so I'm taking any idle time and I'm putting myself or anybody that works with me into some training modules so their skill sets are going to be able to be leveraged to be more profitable. Having that is also value added to your suppliers that you talked about, or people's. What can I do for you? You might be able to do something different for them than you otherwise would normally do because you have skills to bring to the party.
Yeah. So this has been the income statement or the profit and loss statement, depending on where you live. The next big statement, of course, for financial statements is the balance sheet, and this is where we get into the assets. And we talked a little bit about inventory a little while ago in the example of the steak restaurant having a bunch of steak. On the balance sheet, we can see the different places where we can get money from, and they can come from both the assets and the liability side. So in the moment of crisis right now, you probably need to get your hands on money to pay certain things, and not as much money is coming in. So right now, cash flow is going to be the most important thing. But don't lose sight of profitability, because you can do all kinds of things in a business to raise cash while you're losing money, and it's just going to drive you right into the ground. So on the asset side, Paul already mentioned about trying to do whatever you can to collect your receivables more vigorously. We talked about inventory and how inventory can be reduced to raise cash. And if you lower your inventory and by selling it and you don't buy stuff to replace it, you're going to turn that into cash. What are some other ways that we can use different assets, Paul, to raise some money?
Well, the easiest one, if you may, is the credit cards. Uh, the caution there is every credit card gets monitored with extraordinary rigor today by the credit companies, and so you want to spread your credit. You want to try to keep at best 30% levels on all the credit cards. So if you have 5 credit cards and you're going to be sitting on it and not being able to pay it off over months ahead, try not to run up one credit card with, let's just say you got 3 at 10,000 each. Don't put 8,000 on one credit card and 0 on the other 2. Spread it out so that you have 2 or 3,000 on each of multiple credit cards, because that will, even though the total is the same, it'll do a little less damage to your credit score should you not be able to pay it off and reduce it down. So trying to keep, on average, the cards down at a 30% level and make those payments, you can usually buy yourself 3 to 6 months without any credit damage to yourself.
Now, if things are, and this is why keeping an eye on profitability is so important, because if you get 2 months into this crisis, let's say, and you do certain things to get cash that you need to pay bills, like you run up your credit cards, for example, as in Paul's example, you need to keep your eye on the profitability, because if you are not making the changes to be profitable, what can end up happening is you can just start digging bigger and bigger holes into these liabilities that you're not going to be able to dig out of because you're not profitable. And so what I have seen people do in the past who were not watching their numbers, and this isn't even in a recession, this is just people running their business, not really paying attention, is that they will use, things like credit cards, or they'll extend their accounts payable further and further out in the future. They'll take longer and longer to pay their suppliers, and they'll create these debts. And if they're not profitable, they're never going to be able to pay back the debts. And so they just start digging a bigger and bigger hole. And that's not what you want to do. Doing things, incurring, more liabilities in the moment to save your skin is one thing, but the focus has to be on profitability. You've got to reduce the expenses. You've got to increase the sales. You got to do whatever you can to make sure you're profitable. No amount of debt is going to fix a problem of a money losing business. And this is one of my big concerns with what we're hearing in Canada and in the States with the BDC or SBA, is they're talking about making credit available to businesses to help them through this period of crisis. And my fear is that they're going to be lending people 3 or 4 months worth of expenses so that businesses can float without truly addressing, the profitability question. And then when you get to the end of that period, if sales haven't recovered, quote unquote, on their own, right? If we haven't gotten back to business as usual, now you got that extra liability that is going to be holding you back while the expenses still haven't been addressed. And so this is the danger of focusing on the cash flow and forgetting about the profitability.
David, that's excellent advice. And I started at the top of the list with the credit cards, but you're pointing out that's the last place that you want to go. That's your quick cash to solve a problem. When you go to credit cards to solve a problem, you are likely to be solving an urgency issue that maybe you shouldn't solve at all. For example, coming up with the rent payment next month for $3,000, when in fact you should have negotiated with the person renting the building to you to defer that for a couple of months. So I like to look at it that you use these liabilities, equities, and your assets to raise the cash and then put it in a box in a drawer. Don't spend it on near-term solutions, on the fact that your sales are down, the fact that employees need money, etc. Keep it, because you will need it 3 months from now when you have to reboot the business. You'll need every dime of that cash to reboot. And your point is, if you're running a negative cash flow business today and you keep doing that and you tap into all your liability opportunities, your lines of credit, your deferred payables, and you take that cash and keep running your place in the hole, it'll kill you. So
Yeah.
I like to look at it as, yes, these are cash resources to go in a box in the bottom drawer, not to be used to for blood for a business that's killing itself.
Now, so, there's basically two different things that people can try to do. If they've been badly affected by the government mandated closures and things, they can either try to change their business and try to get it to be profitable at a lower sales level or a more restricted, level of business. So think of the restaurant who has to close the dining room and now they're going to do takeout business only. I mean, they could cut their staff. They could make money every day on the food they sell, even though the money they make isn't going to cover the rent, et cetera. They've reduced things to a level that on an operational basis, they're making money. Their overheads are still too high. That's one strategy. Another strategy I've seen from larger, restaurant chains is simply to just close everything, lay everyone off, just shut down. And that strategy is about waiting for a reboot opportunity. So they're kind of making their business dormant. They're preserving what resources they have so they can use that money to get fired up when they come out the other side. The caution I will make for people is that we don't know the true extent of what is going to happen here. And while people like government agencies may be talking about extending further credit, other people may not be in the same mindset, especially if they're lending money that they don't want to lose. So this morning, when I sent out the notice about this live stream, I actually got an email back from a business loan broker who's telling me that in the last 3 days, everything he thought was going to be funded suddenly has not been funded. And so he's dealing with leasing companies and factoring companies and what we would call non-bank lenders. And these are people who have a direct relationship with wherever the money comes from, private equity groups, things like this. And they're really afraid. So they're probably the first of the credit sources which are drying up. And this is precisely why the governments are instructing their agencies to open up the credit availability, because they likely foresaw that reaction was going to happen. So you could very well have credit cards in your pocket right now or lines of credit at the bank, which may not be available in a few months' time. So depending on your scenario and using your best wisdom and what you want to do, you could use some of those debt facilities to generate cash for yourself. And to Paul's point, you take that cash, you put it somewhere else if you're going to reboot your business after a while, because you may lose the ability to get your hands on that money if different things come to pass. It's, I've seen business owners who start to get behind on a payment, and then the other credit suppliers see that, and then they cut the lines, for example. So the resources that you have available to you today may not be. And so that's That's one of the things you want to consider.
Yep, you bring to mind an example of when you're going for a line of credit and people are checking. They say, "Oh, we don't check your personal credit." "Oh, yes, they do." And the banker says, "Hey, you got too much on your credit cards, and so I'm borrowing from my business." It really doesn't matter, because he's going to try to secure whatever amount of money he gives by tying up anything that you can. And so if in fact you get yourself over in credit card debt before you set up other more permanent lines of credit, you'll never get the permanent lines of credit. So that's another reason to not tap the credit card ones at first. And if you do tap it and use it, I'm going to say it again, take the cash and put it in a drawer, because you might need that cash to buy out your credit cards to get you back in a permanent line of credit.
Yeah.
And if you spent the money, you're not in a position, you don't have degrees of freedom. So take every money from anybody that's willing to loan it to you, but just hold it till we see what happens. There was a financial guy on today that they were asking him every which way to Sunny, what's going to happen? He said he is raising cash in his portfolios, which means he's really selling into the market right now. And everybody said, "Oh, you never want to sell into the market when it's low, it's going to come back." He was saying, "We're selling now because I expect it to be able to buy back in 20% less." Well, that's the way we have to look at it from a small business standpoint too, is I want to take my cash now, but I'm not going to spend it because I might have a more serious problem in 6 weeks.
Someone just put a comment in the live stream comments in some kind of funding capacity, saying that they are doing funding right now for equipment transactions, and which is very different, of course, from operating capital. The equipment stands as collateral, and so if we look at our slide, we look at the balance sheet. This is another thing you can consider, is that if the business owns certain machinery and equipment free and clear, then that can be another way for you to raise capital. And if things don't work out, then that debt can be extinguished by handing over the piece of machinery or equipment. If you're able to offer a lien on it, if it's not already encumbered with some kind of bank financing.
That's correct. It's another way to raise the cash.
So when Paul and I started meeting and talking about this a few days ago, we thought, what could we do to help people out? And what I was hearing and what I was seeing from people in the marketplace is that there was a lot of fear. People were people were panicky. They didn't know what to do. So Paul and I put together today's session so that we could share some ideas and share a format for the way people can think about this, and the way that they can start to consider what changes they could make in their business, what options were open to them. And then we decided that we would also make the offer of sharing our time too with people who want to spend some time one-on-one with us. So we decided that what we would do is we would open up our calendars for individual business owners that want to talk about their specific situations, where they can take advantage of a 30-minute call for $39, which is less than half of our normal consulting rates, in our effort to be helpful. And we can't help everyone, but we want to make ourselves available.
David, I'm going to add a couple of comments I know we're probably getting close to a close here, but on these negotiations we're talking about in your relationships with people, your vendors or customers or whatever, I always try to remind myself to express my goals in terms of the other person's interest. So even though I want to go and I would like to get a sale or a contract, I have to sit and reflect of what does that person really need, and what can I say and how can I engage them to find out what their goals and their particular opportunity. And the same thing with employees and vendors and everything else. Expressing the conversation in terms of their interests and being real, being honest with each other and transparent on solutions. The second thing is this creativity can get spun out of control too. And creativity doesn't need to be crazy. It needs to be practical. What can we really do together? What should we do together? What's a good decision that will benefit both parties? And then together have a single next step. And whether I'm doing it for myself, I sit at my desk or whatever, it's okay, Paul, what's the most important thing to get done now? That single next step is all I can really do. Put the others on another piece of paper and go work on that one focused idea to get to the next step.
Yeah. You know, I couldn't agree more. It's about creating a plan of what someone can do when the circumstances around the situation are changing continuously, and we don't really know how long this is going to last and what the net result is going to be. If this thing winds up in a couple of weeks, we may be able to bounce back pretty quickly. If it drags out, there could be a bigger issue. I've had a few comments and questions from different people in specific industries. You want to tackle some of those?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we have a question from the comments about someone in a car dealership, and he is Joe, and he's saying what are some of the ways car dealerships can push through this, because he's concerned about the floor plan that he has, which is accruing interest right now. I mean, off the top of my head, what Joe needs to do is he needs to figure out how he can reduce that inventory he has.
Yes. And I'm sure that there's going to be some programs maybe to help with the interest, but with the car companies shutting down for a couple of weeks, I suspect that not only is that in response to the Defense Act and other things, but it has to be in response to a growing inventory.
Sure.
That all of the car companies are going to be experiencing. So here's a perfect example of engaging all of the sales department to get personally on the phone and reach out to every one of their customers and express charity, express interest, gather the stories, find out what the situations are, and then maybe feed that information as a summary document from his car dealership of this is the problems and opportunities that we can, as a community, address, because a car dealership is a very, very strong force in their local, I'm going to call it 3 to 10 mile community. It's a powerful place. Now, people might not want to come in and look at the cars and talk to the cars for social distancing, but they certainly can negotiate and discuss and be encouraged over the phone with the great websites that car dealerships have. So I think it's a people-to-people reach out and then convert as many leases or as many vehicle opportunities as can be done now. It's a great time for people to lease and get into a new vehicle.
So when I think of somebody who might want a new car, and here's the thing, is the recession that has just begun affects a lot of people, but there are, I don't know, like half the people in the economy work for the government or they're on pension of some kind. Their income's not affected. So there's a huge portion of people who are not affected by this, and they will continue to have their check come in regularly. So what would cause those people not to want to buy a car? I can understand someone who's just been laid off doesn't want to buy a car. They probably can't qualify for the financing today. But what about those other people? And I'll tell you, the thing that would give me pause is I would think, geez, if everything's slowing down, there should be some good deals coming down the pipe from these manufacturers, right? And so I might not want to buy a car because I'd be afraid of buying it before the big deal comes along. And it reminds me of these furniture companies. The furniture dealers will often offer a price protection where they say, if you buy this couch today and it goes on sale in the next 30 or 60 days, come on back in and we'll adjust your amount. And so it's safe to buy it today because if a better deal does come along, they get to enjoy that. And maybe that's something that a car dealership might be able to employ in some way. maybe that's something you can talk to the manufacturer about to get rid of that pause that people might have, and let them know it is a good time to buy, and that they're going to be safe coming down to the dealership.
Well, we're seeing already the advertisements. I saw one from General Motors, and they're doing extending financing for 7 years now, interest free. So all of the programs are starting. I remember the day when Chrysler was raised money from the federal government to stay alive, and Lee Iacocca was on the TV and guaranteeing the K cars. And in Detroit area, we had 100,000 K cars in every open warehouse lot in the city. You could not drive anywhere in the city without seeing 50, 100, 1,000 K cars.
Wow.
And Lee Iacocca liquidated all of those by guaranteeing them for 10 years, full service, and putting them on lease. And that generated sufficient cash flow to keep Chrysler alive together with the government money. That's the kind of drama that you'll probably see at various levels, and getting people back into the game. But it's going to be a person-to-person thing, and I know it's a big asset for people to purchase. But another one I just thought of was commercial people that have the use of a truck or use of a commercial vehicle, like a landscaping company or somebody that needs to replace their fleet or upgrade their fleets. If the salespeople would reach out to all of those commercial people and say, hey, now there's never been a better time to replace that 1987 truck than right now.
Absolutely. I got another question from someone who is in the travel business, and I can't imagine an industry that has been harder hit than someone in the travel agency business with, and the way it works in that industry, of course, is that, people pay to buy a trip, they pay the tour operator, and then after they travel, the agent then collects a commission. So the travel agency right now is probably receiving commission checks from the travel people did in January and February. The problem is going to happen is that right now everyone's calling in to cancel, and in April and May there's not going to be any money flowing. Anything that you can think of, Paul? So I've been racking my head trying to think of an idea of what that person could do other than simply trying to slash every expense that they can.
I guess the easiest and fastest thing to do, if you can get the customers to do it, if you've got some very loyal customers that have money, this would probably work best in the higher income marketplaces, not the person that's barely affording their trip to Cancun, but to do pre-sale of a package. And with their connections in the industry, and let's just say it's a trip to Quebec City in Canada, a wonderful location, fabulous properties that are stilted right now. By negotiating some pre-buy, and you have some wealthy clients that can fund it, take some packages, put them together with the people that own those properties there, and say, hey, we need to do a pre-buy for August, or and then guaranteed, and say, hey, we've got normally a $10,000 trip to Quebec City for 2 weeks, this and food, and et cetera, and to keep the cash flow going, it's a $5,000 proposition, and then share the money the best they can to make it happen.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was talking with somebody else who is reliant on tourism over in Prince Edward Island, and they're worried too about the tourist season coming up. And I said, I think that people are going to be hesitant to travel. Right now things are locked down. People are not allowed to even cross the Canada-US border at this moment, unless it's for an essential reason for business. But I think people are still going to want to travel, but people are not going to want to be in a crowded aircraft or train or bus with other people. And so I think it could be a very healthy summer, as long as the transmission of this virus doesn't get too bad. It could be a healthy summer for travel, for people going places in their own car, being isolated from other people, controlling their own little bit of environment, going and staying in places where there's not a lot of the other people around. I think that people will eventually become a little bit, they'll get cabin fever, or as a word I like to use that we use around here, they'll get a little shack wacky being locked in their homes for more than a few weeks. And people will be looking for what they perceive to be a safe way to get out and change their environment. And so I think there's, to your point, I think there's maybe some products that could be put together that could be sold. And certainly some hotel operators and other people in the industry who will want to be doing something to get people through the door.
I think you're right. I feel the same way, and I'm not inclined to do much. I've done a lot over the years, a lot of travel in the airlines, but at this point, why put myself in that potential risk? I just soon get in my car. So maybe what we're talking about is lease cars together with the travel package, together with a hotel to see, particularly in the USA and Canada. I mean, there isn't a better place on earth, in my opinion. And I've been in a lot of countries.
Yeah. No, there's a
All the
lot to see
things we
right
do.
here. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right on that.
All right. Well, Paul, thanks for coming on. And for anyone who's watching or watching the replay, if you would like to spend a little bit of time with Paul or I to talk about your specific situation, there's in the show notes down below are going to be those links that you see on the screen. And we're more than happy to take some of our time and discount it significantly to what we normally charge to try and help you make it through. All right. We'll see you later.
Hey, goodbye, everybody.